Hey, it's Rachel. I just pruned this whole alley of tomatoes, and I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the difference between pruning your indeterminate tomatoes and your determinate tomatoes. I did a video last year on tomato pruning, but at the time I was really only talking about indeterminates, which is the most common type. But determinates, like your Romas and your San Marzanos, your paste tomatoes, need to be handled very differently, and I felt I should probably cover that as well. This is timely for us because it's about to get quite a bit cooler and very wet and drizzly, almost like spring again. For the tomatoes, it's bad news. Damp, cool conditions are really not great for tomatoes. That's when you can get diseases and fungus and problems. I am taking the opportunity to prune them properly and improve airflow and really make sure that they get a good shot at surviving this bad weather. So let me walk through indeterminate tomato pruning and determinate tomato pruning, how they're different, and why you want to do this at all, with the hopes that others can benefit from this approach. Starting with indeterminate tomatoes, this is most of your tomatoes, your cherry types, and your heirloom slicers. You've got a main stem, you've got side leaves, you've got a big growing tip here at the top, and you've got fruiting sets with blossoms. Those are good. You want to concentrate the plant's energy into that one growing tip and into ripening fruit. The plant, however, wants to hedge its bets and will try and grow suckers. These are the ones that come up at 45-degree angles in each of these intersections. Those will become a plant in and of themselves, but unfortunately they dilute the plant's energy away from the main growing tip and ripening the fruit, which is what we want it to do. So what you want to do is remove those suckers, and as a result, the plant will keep on growing, so don't worry about removing the suckers. This will get to 6 to 8 feet tall, usually, and it will just keep on going, setting more leaves and more blossoms along the way with more fruit. One other note, you do want to remove any root suckers that come up from the base of the plant. Those should come off. You also want to remove the lower foliage, and the reason is the soil down here has a whole bunch of potential for transmission of disease, fungus, bacteria, other problems. And when the rain comes down and hits this and bounces off, it can transmit all of that right into your plant, and you don't want that to happen. So what we do here to prevent this splash is to remove all of the foliage below that first fruit set, meaning the first set of blossoms at the lowest part of the plant. A lot of the rain we're expecting to get is going to be in the form of thunderstorms. We had one recently, and you can see why I pruned the bottoms of tomatoes. The force of the rain coming down caused quite a bit of splashback, and these leaves got completely covered in dirt. The peppers got it. This basil shows it as well. And for these plants, it might not be such a big deal, but for a tomato, that would definitely be a potential vector for disease. There is one exception to removing all your suckers, which is to keep the one sucker right below the lowest fruit set. And if you let that grow, it's a particularly strong sucker, it can become a second main stem. This sets all of its own leaves and blossoms, and you can treat it just like the regular main stem. It will attempt to set suckers, and you do need to take those off, just like with the other main stem. But when you do it this way, you end up with the equivalent of 2 full-size plants and twice the production. You can see my Y-trained indeterminate tomato here, all of the foliage and the suckers that I removed on the lower levels. And here I'll pan up. You can go up the main stem here, that's the lowest fruit set. I removed everything below that. Keep on moving up. You can see as I go higher, I did leave more foliage. And in this case, I've also tied this to my trellis because I'm worried about those thunderstorms. Plenty of leaves up here at the top. Going up this sucker that became its own main stem. Again, I cleaned off the lower levels, tied it to the trellis, and I've left the foliage at these uppers. You can see a sucker I took off here, zoom in, another sucker I took off there, and then a bunch of leaves and suckers removed at this part. Last year, I pruned my determinate tomatoes as if they were indeterminates. Wasn't paying attention. I was on a work phone call and I was multitasking and distracted, and I took off all of the suckers, and that is not what you want to do with a determinate tomato. Let me walk through the difference between them and why you don't want to do that. Moving to our determinate tomatoes, these are mostly your paste types like Roma or San Marzano. These will grow to a fixed height only, usually about 3 feet, and they will set as much fruit as they can on that available height, but then they stop growing. The
The parts are basically the same with leaves and blossoms and fruit sets, as well as suckers. But in this case, we don't want to take them off. You want these suckers as they come up because they mean a bigger crop, and we want to keep them in place and allow the plant to grow them. Root suckers, shown here, should be pruned off, just like with indeterminates, and the soil is still a problem for disease, so we also want to make sure we remove this lower foliage and allow for better airflow through the plant. Here, I can kind of show you removing extra leaves in general. I'm a little more cautious with this on my determinate types because they can get so bushy, and you want to make sure you've got good airflow through the plant, so I do remove extra leaves. Showing this in real life, this is my pruned determinate tomato. You can see lots of stems, sucker right here in the front that I did not take off. I did take off all of the extra foliage. This is the bottom part of the plant. I left it on these upper parts, and I have, because of the thunderstorms that are coming, I went ahead and tied the plants to the trellis for support and to help keep the airflow moving. And I would just say in general, I've tried to take off as much foliage as I can to improve airflow and make sure that these things can survive and not get fungal diseases. It probably seems like I stripped these bare, so I will show you this from above. This is a view down the whole row. There is still plenty of foliage on these plants. They're not naked.
Don't be like me. Don't prune the suckers off of your determinate tomatoes. But in all seriousness, if you are facing rain and damp conditions, it is a good idea to prune your tomatoes and make sure that they've got a fighting chance at surviving those conditions. My next video will be about redoing this spring bed and trying to take advantage of the weird weather. Oftentimes what is a problem for one of your crops is a benefit for the other, and looking at it through that lens can be helpful. It's as much about taking advantage of the opportunities as it is about dealing with the problems when it comes to gardening. Hope that's helpful. I hope that the rest of you are having a good growing season and hopefully less crazy weather than we are. Let me know if you have any questions or comments or would like any additional videos about pruning. I've also got a watermelon here that's starting to go crazy, and I'm going to figure out how to prune that here pretty shortly, so for maybe a video on that as well. Happy advanced 4th of July, and I hope everybody's having a good gardening year. Thanks.